Hello, hello, and good morning. Happy Wednesday. Yes, folks, it is us. I know you missed us that whole entire week. I did see a couple of folks, Lori. I'm not gonna lie. I saw Emma Green yesterday. We're gonna have to ask her if she
You
enjoyed yesterday's webinar.
did. Awesome. Awesome.
So, if this is your first time joining us, hello, my name is Sadie Uribe, and I'm the media producer for Los Angeles Regional SBDC. The SBDC is a national program with over 1,000 locations across the country, helping to stimulate economic growth through business advising and development. The LASBDC offers no-cost services through funding provided by the U.S. Small Business Administration, SBA, and from the California Office of the Small Business Advocate. It's your tax dollars at work. The Los Angeles Regional SBDC network operates 7 service locations throughout Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties. Our services are also offered virtually. We are here to help. We empower small business owners by offering tailored solutions through personalized one-on-one business advising, cutting-edge workshops, and comprehensive programs, all provided at no cost. We are dedicated to supporting your entrepreneurial journey every step of the way. Alrighty, Lori, regale us. I know we got lots going on. I know there's magic happening today, as always.
There is. And guys, I was telling Sadie right before the show, we got a million things that could go wrong because I just got an entire new setup. It came in a box yesterday, a new computer screen, new camera. I was supposed to wait to open it and test it, but I opened the box and so I installed it. We'll see what happens today. But so far, we're looking good. And eventually I'll get the eyes pointed in the right direction. But for right now, we're beginning my new look for next year. So thank you for letting me test this out with you guys. Okay, here we go. I can't believe we're getting close to the end of the year. So this is my webinars that I have remaining for December. So a shout out, I mentioned this last time, the customer sales tax and the cash flow model will not be coming back. I don't foresee it. Of course, it always can, but I don't foresee it. So this will be the last chance to jump in on that. In January, I'm only doing my CFO series and my accounting. The Sole Prop LLC S Corp, which one and why, that may come back in February. Can't really commit to that, but the series that you're seeing for January will compete and complete, and that will be on a monthly basis. That one will not go away. And as always, if you got these questions, you can reach out to me for a one-on-one. Okay, so next week, our last week before the holidays, the way the holidays hit, we're going to be dark, as they call it, for quite some time. So Dahlia's coming on. I want to talk about that accounting prep for year end. Taxes will be there around the season, and so we're going to end. I decided to start out, I think it's January 7th when we come back, with a Lori Happy New Year special session. And I thought it would be fun to kind of talk about, where do we want to go new year? What experiences do we want to have? What changes to make in the business? What things should we consider to be successful? So I decided, with everybody coming back from the holidays, let's just kick it off with just us, just talk between us. And then January 14th, Sarah Peeler is coming on. She's a life coach. And it's going to be interesting. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it next week. I'm gathering some information. We actually have 2 guests coming on the same time with 2 different topics, but I just wanted to at least mention Sarah's coming on, and I will give you the details. Okay. Are you ready for Lori's Corner, which I know it's kind of become Lori's rant, but you're going to love this one. I keep reaching new levels. So here we go. Fasten in your seatbelt. Let's get started. Here is Lori's Corner. And the new currency is... Okay, everybody, yeah, sitting in your chair wondering where in the world I'm going with this one. This was what I was thinking about. So way back when, and I'm speaking way back, salt was the currency in ancient Rome. Many of you might not have even known that. In fact, soldiers got salaries from it, literally worth their weight in gold. So it was all about salt, okay? Well, then I remember learning this in MBA school. Whale oil lit lamps in the 19th century. Everybody chased that for energy till kerosene crashed it, okay? So then, and you probably remember from that movie, somebody can put in the chat what movie it is. I can't remember, but it was plastics. Plastics is the next big thing. It was the next big thing to come on the scene. DuPont pushed it hard post World War II, turning oil into everything from toys to cars. Remember the slogan, better living through chemistry. Now, I remember mostly from seminars and business seminars in the 80s and 90s. It seemed like every seminar screamed customer service, customer service. It isn't just being nice, it's the kingpin currency now for businesses. In fact, in the day, I kind of remember that Nordstrom turned legends on returns alone. Folks trusted them because they over delivered, right? Okay, so then we fast forward and crypto tried to flip currency into digital, but the crashes kind of showed it's fragile. Now, with AI faking voices, images, and even whole chats, I believe the new currency is trust. I believe that is the real gold mine. So we swapped salt for oil for plastic for bits. But today's winners, there's still brands like Patagonia and folks like Warren Buffett built on solid rock, solid trust. Okay. So here's my take. The new currency is trust. In a world drowning in fake, who do we bank on? AI's automating service, chatbots are everywhere, but guess what? Real human touch, authentic, reliable, it stands out more. It still does. It's not obsolete. I believe we've evolved into trust fuel. This is what I've noticed in my daily engagements, which made me start thinking about this. Of course, as you guys know, my daily engagements are filled with clients coming to me with financial problems. They got to file bankruptcy. They don't know what to do. They've not filled out the legal document they're supposed to. The government sent them a nasty letter, all that, right? This is what my daily experiences are. And what I noticed is when people are frustrated, afraid, or confused, they want a human. Nobody wants to go to ChatGPT when they got the legal letter from the government. They're like, how soon can I get on your calendar, Lori? I get it daily. I mean, I literally get people screaming to have at least a minute with me. So when you're looking at a business model, you're looking at your company, you're looking at what am I going to do? How do I compete in an AI dominated world? I'm hearing people say that, especially the younger generation. I don't have the answer, guys. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know. But I can say one thing. A little trust goes a long way. That's Lori's Corner for today. You can tell me in the chat if any of it makes any sense to you. Now, for today's guest. Sean Gardner is an entrepreneur and business leader whose story spans grit. I love that word. That's Emma's favorite word. If Emma's there, that's an Emma word. Reinvention, another great word, and a deep commitment to community impact. The grandson of a sharecropper who made his mark with an X. There's a story there, guys. You just know it. Sean rose to become a top-ranked pharmaceutical and medical device sales professional, earning national honors and transforming an underperforming region into a multi-million-dollar success. He strengthened his communication skills through public speaking, ultimately addressing more than 10,000 people. Sean later earned his MBA before co-founding a childcare enterprise, now on pace to generate $1 million in annual revenue. Outside of business, he has spent years supporting young people through restorative justice mediation and previously served as president of MAD's executive board. His leadership philosophy is simple: build businesses that build communities. Sean, welcome so much to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Lori. It's a pleasure to be here. Really excited to talk to you.
Okay, I can't, and there's a million places I can go, but I can't not start with the grandson of a sharecropper who made his mark with an X. If everybody watching my show knows, I always talk about the fact that I come from a very small country town, blue collar worker. Grandparents were farmers, and my first existence on planet Earth was picking beans in the field and tying cauliflower and all those awful things. But I do believe they made me who I am today. So that resonated with me. So I just want to take a few minutes, in whichever angle you want to go. Tell us about how it's influenced you, or tell us about that statement.
Yeah, my grandfather's life basically was is a major part of my origin story because really my entrepreneurism goes back to my ancestors, like so many of our other, origin stories. And in his case, though he wasn't educated, he was a hardworking man. He understood that sharecropping wasn't providing enough for his family, so he always sold crops on the side. And my dad, his son, was one of 14 children, actually the eldest. And interestingly enough, on that side of the family, the first one to go to college. And he was so motivated to do so. And again, the idea of persevering through difficult times, shooting for lofty goals, even in the face of adversity. These things came from that journey that started with my grandfather, went to my father, and then down to me. So my grandfather didn't live to see my father graduate from college, but my dad believed that that was one of the things he would have been most proud of, that, he couldn't read and write, but his son did graduate.
Oh, it's a beautiful story. My father came from a family of 12.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So
Oh
that's
man.
interesting. Yeah.
Well, back in those days, you had to have a large family because you had to run the farm.
It's so
So,
true.
yeah,
It
you,
is
you couldn't have
so
one or
true.
two.
No, I have to think something that comes to mind that I have to mention. You know how you mentioned that he wasn't a learned man, I think is the expression you use, but he was hardworking. I am starting to wonder, this is just Lori ranting again, but I'm starting to wonder if all our learning isn't harming us in some ways, and what you learn on the farm really matters. Just recently, on last year, I've been going through all of these construction projects, just let's call them, millions of different things, saws, you name it, table saws, all this stuff, right? And there was this one day I was trying to install this door, and I measured and measured and measured. I did everything I could. I could not get this door to swing shut properly. And in that moment, I thought of this, and I think it's kind of funny, but I even told somebody later, I said, you know what? You can cheat. You can fake being a white collar worker. I know many presidents and CFOs
Oh,
that don't
yeah.
know what they're doing. Oh, we're off by $1 million. Oh, what? So it's been a good year. And they go on. You cannot fake being a blue collar worker. I was off by a 16th of an inch and the damn door wouldn't close. And it was just my awe to respect the blue collar workers, because I think they're under the thumbs a lot more on being to be detailed than CFOs.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing about your experience with the door is that, had you been doing it for, whatever number of years, it's likely that you would have had some little trick
Yeah.
to make an adjustment to compensate for that, 16th of an inch. But because that's not what we do, we don't know the trick. So,
It's so true. I ended up getting on this YouTube video, and this guy was awesome. He was like, these are tricks of the trade. And he showed all these little tricks that you do. And I wrote in a comment, I was like, you just saved me so much time, because you gave me basically 20 years of tricks experiences. But I call some of my friends that are blue collar. Okay, what's a trick? What's a trick? And it's so true. Now, there's another part of your background that I find interesting in many ways, and that's the pharmaceutical sales and
sure.
medical device sales. First of all,
Yeah.
I'm very familiar with that industry. So I know that that's a very challenging sales environment. It absolutely is. But it also feeds into something. I remember back being a professor in USC, and it was the undergrads, and they were saying, what should we do as far as getting our first job to prepare for business? They expected me to say something very profound. And I told them, get a sales job, sell the hardest thing that's hard to sell. That's what will prepare you for business. And so I'd just like you to comment on that experience because
Sure.
it seems like you took away a lot of learning and how it applies to everything you've learned in business.
Absolutely. So, the interesting thing about that job and why I ultimately left is that it wasn't a true sales job in that, you have a customer that has a pain point, you come up with a solution, and you're rewarded for coming up with that solution. In pharmaceutical sales, basically, uh, back at corporate, they've negotiated with insurance companies that the patients will have as their coverage to get on a list of products that are approved to be used if they go to the doctor. So basically, I was a glorified caterer in that I would, bring in snacks and food to the office and to the, hospital, overpaid glorified caterer.
Yeah.
So I was pulling through. But in terms of skills that I could take on later, and especially using my entrepreneur experience, the first thing that I learned in sales is that there are two customers. There's the external customer who's responsible for your revenue, right?
Mhm.
Making money, but you also have internal customers. And in my case, especially when I was in corporate America, the internal customer was, my boss and, the management above him, the sales support team, the guy in the, factory that's, shipping the product. I need all of them to align in order to make the sale and make the money. So understanding that, I try to treat each customer base accordingly. And I think sometimes where people don't recognize is that when you have one customer base and you're excellent with them, but you neglect the other, ultimately it will impact, the performance of the job and maybe even whether or not you keep the job. Now,
Yeah.
as an entrepreneur, I discovered that the line isn't as, strong between two groups. It's multiple groups because you have the customer where you make money, but you also have other groups that impact your ability to sell to the customers, whether it's, the city officials that are holding up your permit, or it's, community residents that are upset that, you have an unhoused encampment too close to your business and you haven't been successful in getting rid of it, all of these things that can emerge. And so this other group we call stakeholders, but
Yeah.
these stakeholders can, radically impact your ability to, succeed as an entrepreneur.
I love what you're saying. And when you see me look, I always take notes because there's things I want to talk about. When you're in corporate America or you go for an MBA, you learn the word stakeholders and you use it quite a lot because you have a familiarity with it. I'm really glad you brought up that word because I haven't really focused on it. And this is where I want to go, Sean. Most of the companies today are really dependent on other stakeholders to perform. In other words, that we're not making things from raw
Oh yeah.
material. We're buying them, we're distributing them. We've got all these, we're really decentralized. We rely on either other big companies or small companies. And too little time, I find that people are focusing on making sure they have the right stakeholders in place. In other words, they search out their customer base. They choose one manufacturer because that was the easiest one to get in touch with immediately. And they really are putting their company at risk. That old expression, all the eggs in one basket. So they don't treat every single situation of vulnerability in their company and looking at who are the stakeholders, what else do I have to examine. I think the key to success in our businesses today are really understanding the multiple relationships. That's what you're really talking about. And each
Yes.
one has a different way of looking at it and not subscribing to this concept like, okay, this is my manufacturer and I just have to do everything to make sure they're always happy and giving me the product on time. More taking a position of power. Is that the best manufacturer? Is that the best customer? Is that the best? Comment on that to any degree that you see some insight in what I'm speaking of.
Yeah, no, I think that this is a very important topic because uh, really being an entrepreneur is managing the diversity of these relationships. And not only is it, just managing your supply chain, but you have stakeholders that are external from the purchasing experience and the company, that may be just consuming your social content, for good or bad. And
Right.
they themselves can become stakeholders because they can impact your ability to sell, even if you've done everything else right in terms of, pricing, marketing, supply chain. These stakeholders still can impact, whether or not you're successful.
Yeah, it's funny because people talk today like we're not engaged in relationships because we're not doing one-on-ones, handshakes, and all that. So they say it's not about relationships. I think we are more than ever. I remember a long time ago, going back to my, Lori's Corner customer service, where this thing was the customer that goes away without ever complaining is the scariest customer because you're getting no feedback and you can go without noticing them because they can just walk
Right,
away. And this can be
right.
something very important to know. That walk away concept is, I think, the scariest in our relationships today because we have so many choices. All of a sudden, I can choose another manufacturer if they're not doing as well. Customers can choose another supplier of whatever if they're not happy with how I'm doing. So I think we have more relationships, but they're more fragile than ever because they're easily replaced. And I think that's where our vulnerability is in not managing today's relationships.
And when you let that customer walk away without the feedback, it additionally hurts you because you can't manage expectations going forward. Your customers, new customers come in and they might have the same expectation that the customer that walked out had, but you don't
Right.
know what that customer expected, so you can't know what the new ones expect as well.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Well, you said something that I wrote down that we're going to get into after we tell your current story. And I'm just going to
okay.
give you a clue because you're going to know where I'm going to go. Is when the city officials and permitting is also part of your vulnerability. Yeah, yeah, okay. We don't even get because that is something that I want to chat more in depth about. But we're getting ahead of ourselves
Yeah,
because you and I know why we're saying that, and our audience doesn't. So take us more current. What have you gotten engaged in? What is it? And then let's back up and unravel that onion and how you ever went from what we've learned so far about your background to where you are today. So kick us off.
sure. Well, so, I stumbled into the childcare business, so to speak, back when I was still in sales and, making a lot of money and not sure what to do with it. Someone had said, oh, you should invest in a business. So I invested in another daycare kind of as a silent partner.
Okay.
And at that time, that business struggled. And so I thought, you know what, I can use my, sales experience to help them with marketing and, maybe close some gaps for them. And it worked out. And at the same time, I became a little more active in the day to day, not just the entrepreneurial stuff, but like summer field trips, I helped out driving, and being an extra. Chaperone, so that the ratios were appropriate and all that good stuff. And in that process, ended up falling in love with the kids because there is nothing more infectious than a child's laughter. It's
Yeah.
so pure and
Yes.
innocent. It's like few things in our lives, ever rise to that level of innocence, going forward. So fell in love with the kids and when I left corporate America and had an opportunity to start another daycare, because this is the second location that we're working on, you know, it just felt right. Uh, I've been doing things from, youth coaching to the volunteer work at Centinela Youth Services, which is an NPO that specializes in restorative justice for young people. In the past, it's typically been, nonviolent offenders, non-drug related cases where young people have gotten in trouble. And rather than sending them through the court system, getting them jail time or a permanent record, this is a diversion program that allows them to, pay back the community, so to speak. But at the same time, recognize the impact of their behavior, not just be a number that, goes through the system. And so with all of these things I had going on in my life, it felt right. Went ahead and did it. The first, location went well. The second location, a much bigger expansion. This location, which is near Western and King Boulevard in South Los Angeles, it has the capacity for 72 children.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a 44 square foot building, two-story, six rooms. We spent six figures in leasehold improvements to bring it up to speed. When we went to see the property, the history of the property, we're in it now, but prior to us, it was a de facto um, unhoused motel for about 18 months. And prior to that, it was a charter school for about 10 years. And what's interesting is when we went to see the property with the broker, we're taking a tour and we're going from room to room. And we go to the first room. We're now in the second room. We notice in the second room, there's a triangle shape hole cut into the drywall that goes from this room to the third room next to us. And we're like, huh, what's this about? And there's something hanging covering the hole. So the broker reaches in and pulls back what is a blanket. Now, mind you, this guy is a former basketball player. He played internationally, not in the NBA, but 6'7", over 300 pounds. He pulls it back and jumps back because he sees people in this third room. There are people living in the third room. And
Oh my
so
God.
yeah, yeah. And so they had cut a hole in the wall to step through and go to a bathroom that was in the second room. And what's really
Whoa.
interesting is that I don't know why anybody would ever do this in real estate, but for some reason, at some point in the property's journey, maybe the charter school, in that third room, they walled off a bathroom that was at the back of the room. So had they drilled, instead of going to the right, they had drilled just behind them, they would have had a bathroom in the same room. We wouldn't have been the wiser, at least until we got into that third room.
Right.
So, needless to say, that initially cut the visit short, and
Yeah.
we had conversations with the property owner, and she was like, "Hey, I'm gonna fix this," and we went back and forth for a couple months, and we got really close to closing on a property in the valley, that was pretty much turnkey, beautiful. Another really positive owner. The owner was like, you guys need a kitchen. I'll put 15,000 into the kitchen to get it the way you need it. You guys just take care of the play area. We had to do a playground, but it was so far away. It was Reseda. And so we were
Okay.
like,
Yep.
oh, the commute is going to be brutal. You know,
Yeah.
uh, we got our starts in the South Los Angeles community in terms of, everybody that was involved and, their first jobs and that sort of thing. So we really wanted to be there. And once the owner gave us the word, we agreed to. We, go ahead and sign the lease, get the keys, and we thought it would just be that simple. Now we're ready to fix it up and open. And the story gets even more interesting because right outside the property on the corner, there is one of those underpasses that goes under the street and comes out on the
Okay.
other side. In this instance, the underpass used to take children from the west side of Western over to the east side to go to Martin Luther King Elementary. Now,
Okay.
these underpasses started popping up between 1910 and 1920 in Los Angeles. This one dated back to 1920, so it was over 100 years old. But in the 70s and 80s, it became too dangerous to traverse for, children. So the city put padlocks on the entryways, which were just chain link fences. Well, starting in the late 80s, there's been a rotation of unhoused people that have moved into the entrances and the tunnels, cutting the city's lock and putting their own lock on there. And so by the time we took possession of the property, there was a guy living there. who called himself I, as in I see you. And he was the de facto property manager for the property. He had an underground business going. He's what do you like? Oh, Seinfeld. I know a guy, like you need something. I
Yeah,
know a
yeah.
guy that he's that guy, kind of underground, hood. And so he expanded his business into real estate and started renting out spaces in the
Oh my
building
God.
that we at least. And so initially when we took hold of the property, there were some very angry tenants because they had paid him to be in that space. Unbeknownst to me at the time, one guy had even changed the lock on one of the rooms and put like was it air mattress, in and everything. So he had planned on being there for quite a while. So those folks were not very happy that we ended up in the space. Anyway, in
Oh my
terms of,
God, that's amazing. And a lot of this, I'm assuming, at your cost and time and lack to be established in the business like you wanted to. In other words, this ended up being a little bit of a financial and time hit, I'm assuming.
unfortunately, it's still ongoing because
Oh
even
no.
though the city has subsequently knocked down the entryway to the tunnel and put a lid on it, Uh, I has subsequently moved along our perimeter fence. And so during the time that we've been there, because obviously it gets cold, he has started two fires, including burning up our pedestrian door. Um, and we had an inspection before that was due right after the first fire. So I thought for sure, because I've gone to city council, gone to the police, whatever. So I thought, okay, the fireman's going to come. He's going to see the guy right there and the fact that I can't open my pedestrian door. And he's going to say, oh, we got to do something about that.
Right.
He's like, yeah, that's a police matter. I'm not gonna, fail you on your inspection, but that's a police matter. So he moves back and forth along my fence. And just the last fire was 3 weeks ago. And I get a notification, on my phone because I have cameras. And so it's like 4 in the morning, and I'm like, oh my God, that's a fire.
Oh. Oh my. So let's walk back for just 1 second.
Okay.
This is the second location. I want to understand, when did you get engaged in the first location, and what was the size of the first location in relationship to the second location? And then we're going to dig through everything you just said, but just so we get an idea of the progression of the businesses.
Yeah, the first location is small, 20, capacity
Yeah.
students. I got involved, I want to say maybe 15 years ago.
Okay, quite some
And
time.
yeah. And I'd been thinking of expanding, but I never saw myself on site full time. I always thought I would do the enterprise thing, get it up and going, and then because there's not enough for me to do in a day to day. I'm not
Right,
skilled at necessarily teaching. I can help out at appropriate intervals like summertime for field trips, that kind of thing. But other than that, skills are limited. So that changed in this instance because there were so many bureaucratic road bumps that we face. Like, for example, when we went to the city with our plans, there's a parking lot next to the two-story building, and when the charter school had the property, they had the parking lot, and then they took the space that was closest to the perimeter fence, and they put up a tent and then put like picnic style benches underneath. And that's where the kids took their meals. Now, they didn't tell the city that they were going to do that. Highly illegal because you can't have kids in an open space like that and not have, the bumpers to prevent cars from,
right.
accidentally going in. So anyway, that's their setup. We took our plans and we wanted to, because we have to have a playground. So we wanted to put the playground right next to the building and then move the parking lot closest to the fence, and so we get to the city and that's the first thing that they reject. Oh, you guys are kind of grandfathered in, and I'm like, So, conditional use, isn't that on the building or, they're saying, oh, it's the entire property. And I'm like, well, it's still a school. We just want to, we're putting in a playground. We want to put it next to the building, safer for the kids. Because putting it along the fence, you have a privacy screen up, but anybody can cut the screen and reach through, technically if
Right,
they
right,
want it.
right. Yeah, right.
So that was the first thing they rejected. The second thing was we put down a 16-inch um, rubber surface, that
Mhm.
we put the play equipment on and all that
Yeah,
good stuff because, that's required. You
right.
can't have kids falling on, real earth these days. I don't know if you've ever watched that comedian, David Arnold. Unfortunately, he passed, but he has two Netflix specials, and that guy was hilarious. He was, taken way too soon, and he has a thing. He says, the problem with our society today are our kids, because we changed the texture of the earth for them. Like they don't,
Oh, I know.
fall on the ground like we used to.
I know, when you think about our beginnings growing up in the country, we don't even have to go there. We never even wore helmets, and I'm still alive. Yeah, but
Right,
we don't even have to go there. What's interesting about what you're saying is that people do not realize to the degree if their business model requires permitting or authorization from any government entity, to the degree that process it needs to be considered in the business model because it can hang you up for a long period of time and go through cash you did not expect. It can
right.
discontinue your ability to do things you had hoped you could do. I just had a company I was speaking to where, from the start, their main issue, because there's a lot of risk in what they do, is the insurance that they have to pay. And they're trying to change that, but it's a fact. And I was trying to explain to
Right.
the entrepreneur that when you look at a business model, you can't just look at it and say, yeah, this is the cool thing I'm going to be doing. That government, regulatory issues, insurance issues, cost of
Oh
insurance
man.
is needs to be looked at into the whole business model and its feasibility. We always would think of that in MBA school with the weaknesses were the government regulations that could change. But when we've gotten into the smaller companies, they don't realize to the degree government regulations can impact them. How are you managing to get through this? This sounds overwhelming. I'm just listening to it and I feel overwhelmed.
Well, so like you said, you have to plan for that. So we budgeted for 8 months to get through
Okay.
both the city and the state because you have to, if you have a commercial childcare, if you're going to get licensed to, transact this business, you have to go through both entities. However, it's changed. Before you used to be able to go through the tracks simultaneously. Now the state has basically said, we want to make sure that the city that you're going to be in is going to be happy first. So you finish with them and then you come to us. And you can't start that process until, the other
Yeah.
happens. And so basically the city held us up for we budgeted for 8 months to get through both. The city held us up alone for 16 months for the 16-inch rubber surface. And as I repeatedly, told my analysts, this doesn't make any sense because we're not doing anything innovative. Like if you walk down the street to your local park, they have a soft surface. So
Wow.
what's the problem here?
Yeah.
And it ended up being a fire inspector signing off on the length of um, the soft surface. And so back then, they were still kind of remote. Now they're hybrid with being on site mostly. But I would, I'm not proud to say, but I would stalk this guy socials, and I see him taking a beautiful bike ride, mountain bike ride in the mountains on a Wednesday, and I was like, man, those are some beautiful pictures. That bike ride just cost me about $1,500.
Oh my God. And you have to pay your lease during all this, I'm assuming. You're incurring
Oh
expenses.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's why
absolutely.
I wanted to make mention to this because, so immediately those guys that don't have a brick and mortar in the audience just go, phew. I always
Right.
explain I always say this. It's funny, Sean. I say brick and mortars are a whole nother animal. And I call these what we define in society as our vulnerable population. And that is the kids and the seniors, right? When you're
Right.
doing anything in a business that engages in those two groups of people, your government regulations and your permitting is going to be your biggest issue because those are
Right.
the vulnerable, protected classes, if you will, if I can use that kind of language. Where are you at in this process? Do you feel like you're any further? You're just watching him take beautiful bike rides still.
Well, so I finally had to threaten this guy with, letting him know that I'm going to his manager. And, I really should have done it earlier in the process, but I I got bad advice. I had people telling me that, these city people are too powerful and they'll find another way to nick you if you, piss them off. We eventually got through the process. It took another 8 months to get through the state, to get our license. So, all told, 24 months, just to get through the permitting and licensing process. And never in my wildest dreams did I think, okay, that's what this scenario is going to be. So, of course, it affected some things,
Oh, yeah.
primarily the design of the playground. We had budgeted for putting together a really nice playground with, a very nice shade, uh, overhead. Those things are very expensive. They require, engineering and permitting as well, and so on and so forth. Well, you have to divert money to, just hold on. So fortunately, we did get through that, and then we began the process of, marketing and, building up capacity and that sort of thing. And, there's still bumps. There are employee issues that come up that, sometimes I think shouldn't come up. And just the way we've divided it with my management team is that, so that they can maintain relationships, I play the heavy.
Mhm.
And so, to give you an example, and I like this example because I have 21 nieces and nephews, which I call nephews because it's too long to say it any other way. And I'm always having this conversation with them about, how to build a life. Oh, sorry. Um, every time I'm on a call, he thinks he's on a call. Anyway, my bad. So, the employee showed up wearing a hoodie and just going about her day. Now, normally the dresses you wear either like casual pants or business dress shorts and a polo. Maybe a t-shirt, but it has to be a t-shirt that, goes to your neckline, that kind of thing. A hoodie really isn't a part of the dress code.
No, not for kids. No, definitely not.
And
Yeah.
so, it's funny because I showed up that day and was going to do some other things, saw her and, proceeded to have a conversation, primarily because of what you were saying earlier about trust. And I said, you look like you're going to a 7-Eleven and not working with children today. I said, is there a reason that you're dressed like this? And she said, oh, well, I forgot to put on my wig. And in California, you're not really supposed to talk to employees about their hair. I understand
Right.
that. And I said, okay, no problem. I said, why don't you, clock out, go home, put on your wig, and come back to work? Well, this young person proceeded to tell me that she did not want to do that. She wasn't interested in going home to put on her wig. She felt like just having the conversation was triggering, and she proceeded to have a conversation with the um, executive director about how inappropriate I was as a man talking to a woman about her dress.
Oh my, it's
Uh,
so tricky. It is so tricky. Like I said, one of the things that always scares me is employees, and it seems like it's more challenging. I want to go back, and this is a hard thing to define, Sean. So I'm asking a challenging philosophical question, but I have to go
mhm,
back there, okay? As you were talking about the city official, and you were talking about the fact that you had to kind of strong arm them and be a little bit more, I'm going to not say the word aggressive because I'm not speaking of that, but more direct in your communication. What I find a lot, and this is why I'm coming back, I think this is a key point, especially, I like our audience to hear. too many times, I think, and I'm not even sure the right word, so let's kind of walk around it a little bit. But too
Okay.
many times, business owners, especially the younger entrepreneurs, they come from more, I can't think of a better word. So there's a better word, but I'm going to say a subservient type position where they think everybody has authority over them. So the city official has authority, the customer has authority, the manufacturing has authority, right? Because they haven't built up the confidence a lot, right? But I think that not obviously, I'm not saying be aggressive in their face or threaten. I'm not saying any of that. But I think when you come from that position, like, oh, you don't watch out, they'll ding you on something else, and you take that approach. I've seen it a million times in my life. It never works out. It seems like you
Right.
always have to come in a confident, direct, and clear approach, whether you're talking to a customer that wants a refund, a manufacturer that isn't coming through, an official that wants to do permitting. I mean, you were in the ultimate example here where you were really being held hostage. So I think it's a
Right.
beautiful moment, if we could, to just talk about the entrepreneurial behaviors that one has to engage in, which you're more familiar with when you're in corporate and you're older, that many of our audiences maybe not have to have come up against. Got any thoughts on that weird question or that deep question, I guess you could call it?
I love that question, primarily because, hindsight being 2020 is, I was reminded of my days as a salesperson when the customer that was the squeaky wheel, right, got the oil.
Yeah,
And so I
yeah,
thought, what am I doing? I
yeah,
need to be the pain in the butt this guy doesn't want, others to know about, so he can CYA and get me out of the way. And so
right.
I made that realization late. But going forward, if I had the opportunity to jump in a time machine and go back and do it again, or for sure going forward, I'm gonna be the noisy one that demands attention and run the risk because I really believe that there wouldn't have been a consequence for expecting this person to do their job, which is what they weren't doing when they were taking these bike rides during the middle of the day when they were expected to be working, but just not in a physical location where the job was located.
Yeah, I agree. And, I came up with, as you were speaking, what I'm really saying is when we walk on eggshells, it just doesn't do us any good. And I think that that's one of the advantages is when you go in business out of school and you get exposed to the business world, you do get exposed, right or wrong, but you do get exposed to how people, I'm going to use the word debate, be it a lawyer situation or a situation with your managers, or you see managers talk to vendors. They are very clear. You're not coming through with this contract. And if you don't go through with this contract, we're going to have to look for another manufacturer. We would like to work with you, but we need to know what are you currently doing to remify the situation. That's everyday talk in corporate America. It's completely acceptable. But the younger entrepreneurs not exposed to that don't know that. They're like, oh, what if the manufacturer, I had a hard time. I don't have the time to find. And I think that's harming so many of our small companies. That's why I love how I said that. And now we're talking about an actual way to work with the manufacturers, et cetera. Come from a position, I don't know, I always say a position of power. Maybe that's not a right way to say it, but I think
I
there's
like
some
that.
truth to that. I always say, I'm big on the show and I talk about it all the time is getting back your power. We have to come from a position of power. And when we come from a position of power, to me, the way I use the word is it also incorporates, being kind. You don't have to be unkind, but you do have to be clear and say what it is that has to happen. And you have
Absolutely.
definitely experienced that a lot.
Yeah, and I think there's also the consideration or the course that has to be navigated where people that should be doing differently aren't doing so for political reasons. So for example, the thing with the unhoused, there's been a city ordinance in place for nearly a half decade where there is not supposed to be an encampment within 500 feet where children congregate, school, parks, that kind of
Right?
thing.
Right.
And there isn't a place where our encampment has been near our property where they've been 500 feet away from the school or from us. and yet it's not enforced because people are worried about the optics, they're worried about, social media. And so, I think it's tough being an entrepreneur and knowing that in this case, you won't be able to beat the politics until you find someone high enough. And in that
Yeah.
case, you totally can take action because, this person will be penalized for not doing their job. There's no politics that, prevent them from doing so. And so just
Yeah,
navigating that.
it's interesting. You know what I thought of, Sean? It kind of goes back to our stakeholders. When we look at any situation happening in the world, I'm just going to be expansive on that. But if we're looking at it from one
Right.
perspective, we can get really, well, they should be doing this and, humankind and this. And then you got to
Right.
really look at how does this impact all around? And that's when you become more that whole person and you understand what taking your power back is because you see it from so many perceptual positions. And I
Hmm.
think for a lot of people, and it happens in every generation. I remember growing up thinking everybody should not have money and we should just all, be able to freely give things to people when I was, 12 and 15. And then you think,
Sure.
okay, everything's bad, and then become a business owner, and then people say you become a parent, and suddenly you get an awakening to the other side of things. And I know one
Right.
of the biggest leaps is when people become business owners and they suddenly realize that corporate greed, they're charging too much. Yeah, a little truth there perhaps, but that doesn't mean I can't charge what I need to make money too. You start to see things from
Right.
totally different ways of looking at it.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so there's another gold mine that we're talking about here that I want to, strip it out and mention it. And that is you're supposed to be 18 months to how many months it's taken. And this is what I see in all companies, even the ones just selling online, but it's devastating in the ones that are investing in any kind of brick and mortar. I've got a couple clients right now that are planning on buying existing businesses, and I've been trying to talk with them about what we're about to talk about, and they just don't even acknowledge it. They don't acknowledge what it takes to get a physical location up and running, whether it's a restaurant. I have somebody right now that's buying an RV park, huge park. Oh, well, it's just going to be one manager on site and we're going to get, at least 50% occupancy in the first 2 months. I'm like, no, you're not even going to get the weeds pulled out of the yard in the first 2 months. And I've been having conversation with multiple individuals that are in that same position, same conversation, different things. And I said to someone yesterday, and it's funny because we're having this conversation. I said, do you know one of the biggest mistakes I see people do is they don't recognize the amount of cash flow that it will take till they're fully up where they can recognize the revenue that they're
Right.
basing profitability on. And that's the whole thing with investment banking. And you don't want to have a round B because you want to make sure that they're investing enough from the beginning. And if the investors don't have enough to take you to the level, they don't want to invest, right? So I think entrepreneurs do not recognize the amount of cash or activities to get it to where it's profitable, and they don't have the reserves. I think my statement is very smart, but I know yours is going to be brilliant because you're friggin' sitting in what I'm talking about. So I'm going to just pass it to you for some advice that you can give to others.
Yeah, I think you know, a lot of times when entrepreneurs decide that they're going to pursue, a business pathway, um, they may have talked to one or two people that have experience doing it or, researched it a little bit. But I think if there are associations for whatever type of business that you're starting, if you're going to be, a painter and there's a, exterior painters
Yeah.
association, I would expand the research and talk to as many people as possible because a lot of times we make these decisions based on the experience of one or two or a handful of people that we know or that know somebody we know. And the reality is that, it almost never hits the mark of what you planned for.
Yeah.
Something is going to come up that you didn't think of. And primarily because the environments that affect the business keep changing.
Yeah.
Like today, the insurance, business insurance market is just ridiculous. Like,
Yeah.
as we have been pursuing our business insurance, we aren't able to get lesser premiums because we haven't been in business for X amount of time.
Right.
So in the minds of the insurance companies, we are an even greater risk. So
Right.
while, Target, pays next to nothing, per unit for their insurance, we pay, five times that amount because we're not Target. And then additionally, for the first, I think it's now 3 years, but there's a movement to move it to 5 years. The first 3 years, you can't even go directly to most insurers. You have to go through a broker who then charges you an additional fee.
Really? Huh.
Yeah, so my policy is underwritten by an insurance company, right? And they are taking thousands of dollars for their premium, but they will not negotiate directly with me. They make me go through a broker. Um,
Wow.
I'm not going to say what a broker is
Right.
because he's making a living and he's locked in. It's not my fault. It's not his fault he's locked in, or maybe it
Right.
is. I don't know. But anyway, he's adding to that cost. And I
Cost. Yep.
can't, I'm just now getting to the point where I will be able to say, okay, now I want to deal directly with the insurance company. I want no more broker. So that's a new thing. 10 years ago, you start your business, you can go directly to the insurance company and they may or may not have added, the multiplier for risk that they do today. And uh, there is a different down payment for the new business, brand new spanking business versus the business that's been in operation for a year or two. And then the business that's been in business for 5 years, there's a different down payment for them. And so that insurance environment just keeps changing. And so when you're making your budget, you're likely making your budget based on an old model. And
Yep.
it's
Yep.
hard to,
Gotcha.
anticipate
Yeah.
every single factor and keep pace with whatever the current market is doing. And so you just got to talk to a lot of people. You can't just be one person, two people, a handful. I think if you do less than, 10, 15, or 20, you're probably doing yourself a disservice. And while that might sound like a great amount of effort, it will
No,
likely
it's worth it.
save you
Yeah.
tens of thousands of dollars if not more, on the back end.
And too, I love that. That was a great bit of information for our audience. And another thing I always like to point out or try to get to the root of is what is the person wanting to experience? For what I mean by that, if we take, just daycare, I have a lot of companies in daycare, so I have a lot of exposure to it. And I have several that, just do the home daycare. It's limited in the numbers, but it's really different in the complexity, right? And so they're able to have a completely different business model. So I think the advantage that we have with today is we can say, well, I want to have kids in a daycare situation. You can choose, do I want a home care model? Do I want a
Right.
small one? Do I want a large one? Do I have this? And I think rather than just going down the, oh, I envision a big one with a lot, or I envision a home, really try to mirror what your cash is, what your daily desires of your life to be like. Do you want to deal with city? Do you not? And try to put all that together. I think too many people, it's the old thing,
Right.
oh, we're going to get married and be happy forever, because we dated a month. Sorry, I couldn't help it. That's the only thing I could come up with. But I think it's important to really look at the entire picture and do a thought experiment and say, this is what my life is going to look like. I have so many people that start a company because they like the activity the company performs, but they started in a way that they're not even going to be engaged in that activity because they got to spend all the time doing something else in making the
Right.
company successful. So I think it's real important to figure out all the angles. What do you want out of it? How much cash you have? What do you want to be involved in? What do you not want to be involved in? So we're getting near the end. I'm going to let you comment on anything I said, plus any last words. And also, I'm going to throw one more at you, Sean. How do you get up every day and keep going?
So this is a question I love as well because it's not only applicable in business, but it's also applicable, at least in my life, and I share it with my nephews. You have to have the ability to, or at least know the value of taking a knee And the reason I say this, and it goes back to sports. Back in our younger days, if you played football or know someone that plays football, a lot of times if you are tired, you take a knee in the huddle or on the sidelines to kind of take a break. I think
Okay.
it is applicable in business because there are things that come up that are just unforeseen, unknown, unanticipated. And when they do, you being a human being, you're going to go through whatever the spectrum of emotions that you feel, you're going to go through those. And so you have to give yourself the opportunity to take a knee because, and I'm going to speak for me directly here in this case, I can't simultaneously be, listening to the voices of doubt and failure, and at the same time, being optimistic and engaged and plugged
Yeah.
into, working a strategy that I have, a plan that I have to move the business forward. I can't, my mind just doesn't work that way. And so you can't be a robot as an entrepreneur.
Right.
So you have to
Right.
give yourself an opportunity to take a knee, whatever that looks like, whatever amount of time that is, knowing mentally that after you've taken a knee, we are now standing up, we're now putting it behind us, and now we're moving forward with the plan or adjusting the plan to whatever the new reality is.
That is absolutely beautiful. And I think it needs to be spoken more. For a lot of times for me, I've always realized that if I get up and I take a walk, for me, it's a physical movement, a walk. So I'm not straining myself when I'm exhausted. I'm just walking. I can come back with such clarity. And I think what happens is when something bad happens in our life or in our business life, it doesn't matter. Fear gives us a knee-jerk reaction where we want to try to solve it that minute, but we're not solving it in our full power with our
Right,
resources because we're not even present. We're in the future worried about something or
right.
in the past angry, so we don't have the resources of now. So I think
Yes,
stopping for a second, I've got this new thing I started saying about 4 or 5 years ago to myself. I would go, okay, is it imminent, like it's happening right this minute? And is it self-evident it's going to happen no matter what? If it's imminent this minute and it's self-evident it's happening no matter what, and I got to make a quick reaction, that's one thing. But
right.
most I've never seen anything that is. And then I argue with myself one day. I go, well, if a bomb's falling on my head, it's imminent and it's definitely happening in this moment, but it still wouldn't matter. So I started to make everything. Yeah, you know what I mean? I have like that little brain went inside and goes, well,
Oh,
theory's
I
a
like that
little
analogy.
incorrect because it doesn't even
Yeah,
matter then. So then my brain went back and said, so it's always good to take a break, get repositioned, get your power back, and come from a position of full resources and power so you can make the best decision going forward. But I love what you said.
absolutely.
Absolutely. Any
Absolutely.
last
So,
words you'd like to say to the audience? Thank you for sharing this story. What a wild, challenging, difficult. I'm sure, I gotta say there's probably a lot of people in our audience, they can comment and chat, feel very lucky in their position right now. You made everybody feel better just by sharing what you're going through. Because I know I'm like, oh my God, that would overwhelm me to death. But please, any last words you'd like to share with us?
plugging into agencies like the SBDC, as well as, mentors, friends that, have either extended themselves to a higher goal. It can't just be the friend that you grew up with because
Oh
sometimes
yeah.
those friends aren't going to understand.
Yeah.
Just you got to stay connected to people. That's the point. You can't go through this alone and feel like you're going to be a success because number one, even if you succeed in that way, which is not necessarily a guarantee, you're going to look
Right.
up and then be alone, which is why do any of this? So yeah, stay connected to people, find a way.
Yep. Absolutely, absolutely. So to everybody out there, Sean's information is in the chat. Sadie will stay behind as always and make sure you get it. Check out the company. What a I knew you had a story to tell. Okay, when I asked you to come on the show, I had no idea whatsoever. I was as engaged in the story as if I was in the audience. So thank you so much for sharing. So Sadie, gonna bring you back on. Was that not the story of stories?
I mean, for me, it was the thing of like going through the wall, and then like I was just like, oh my God, I need some popcorn right now. I'm like, tell me more.
Absolutely. Okay, so Sadie is going to stay behind like she always does. Do check out all the information from Sean and do follow our advice today. Sean's advice, I think we hit on so many great concepts that can apply to every single person, every single company, even personally in the life. And that's what we're all about. So I have to say, thank you, frequent flyers that are here every single week. Thank you for being here for another great show. Next week is our last show for the year. Can you believe that? That's awesome. So thank you. If you've been new, check out next week and the past shows. Sadie will put that in there as well. I think we're into 3 years now, craziness of past shows. So if you get bored during the holidays and you're tired of listening to the relatives, just click on Small Biz Talk. Maybe entertain the nephews and nieces with business education class and watch some fun
Absolutely.
small talk business shows. Okay, time for me to go. So I have to say thank you for watching Small Biz Talk with your host, Lori Williams. Thank you again, Sean, and I'll see everybody next
Thank you for
week.
having me.
Bye bye.
Bye. Alrighty, guys, we know the drill. I will be hanging out. I'm going to give you guys enough time to click on those URLs, sign up for Lori's webinars, and you know how it is. It's just sign up, click, register. If you something comes up, you're not able to make the session, no worries. There's no such thing as like attendance or bad marks. It's just literally it's go as you click away because it's better to be registered and then have the chance to sign up versus, oh no, I don't know what it is. Like I said, just go ahead, click. So if you need anything, I've been putting Sean's information. I waited till the end to put in those Lori webinars in there, but if there's something you specifically need, let me know and I can drop that in there for you. I got the poll going on because we got to let you know how you guys enjoy this class. You know, what other types of topics do you guys want to see webinars are, you know, in the whole entire network or just in the small biz world. So we say, let us know because if you don't tell us what you want to hear more about, we can't make those webinars happen for you. Alrighty, guys, I'm putting myself on mute. Let me know if you need anything. I be here.